On the night of April 14, 1912, the world believed it had created the greatest ship ever built. The RMS Titanic wasn't just a luxury liner, it was a symbol of human ambition. People called it unsinkable. It was a floating palace with grand staircases, elegant dining rooms, and dreams carried by more than 2,200 passengers and crew. Some were millionaires chasing luxury. Others were poor immigrants chasing a better life in America. They came from different worlds, but they all shared one destination: hope. No one knew that within hours, the Atlantic Ocean would turn those dreams into one of the greatest tragedies in history. The Titanic departed from Southampton, England, on April 10, 1912, heading for New York City. Families waved goodbye from the docks, believing they would soon be reunited across the ocean. Among the passengers was John Jacob Astor IV, one of the richest men in the world. There were also ordinary families who had sold everything they owned for a chance at a new beginning in America. Children laughed on deck. Couples admired the endless ocean. Musicians filled the air with beautiful melodies. Everything seemed perfect. But late on April 14, wireless operators received repeated warnings about icebergs ahead. Those warnings never fully changed the ship's course or speed. Then, at 11:40 p.m., a lookout spotted an enormous iceberg directly ahead. Iceberg, right ahead. The crew desperately turned the wheel and reversed the engines. It was too late. The iceberg scraped along the starboard side of the Titanic, tearing open several compartments below the waterline. At first, many passengers barely noticed the impact. Some even joked about it. But deep inside the ship, freezing seawater rushed in faster than anyone could stop it. The ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, inspected the damage and delivered heartbreaking news to Captain Edward Smith. The Titanic would sink, and it had less than 3 hours to live. Panic slowly spread through the ship. The biggest problem wasn't just the iceberg. It was that the Titanic carried lifeboats for only about half the people on board. Many believed the ship was still safe. Some passengers refused to leave the warmth of the luxurious cabins for small wooden boats floating on a dark, freezing ocean. As the ship tilted, reality became impossible to ignore. The famous order echoed across the decks. Women and children first. Families were torn apart in seconds. Husbands kissed their wives goodbye. Fathers hugged their children one last time. Many knew they would never see them again. One of the most unforgettable moments came from the ship's musicians. Instead of running for their lives, they stayed on deck and continued playing music to calm frightened passengers. They played until the very end. Not one of them survived. As water flooded the lower decks, electricity began to fail. The once magnificent ship became silent except for screams, prayers, and the roar of the freezing Atlantic. At 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912, just over 2.5 hours after striking the iceberg, the Titanic broke apart and disappeared beneath the ocean. More than 1,500 people lost their lives. The water temperature was so cold that most people who entered it survived only minutes. Yet even in unimaginable tragedy, incredible courage emerged. People gave away their places in lifeboats to save strangers. Crew members stayed behind to help others escape. Wireless operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride continued sending distress signals until the very last possible moment, helping summon rescue ships. Hours later, the RMS Carpathia arrived and rescued around 700 survivors. For them, survival came with overwhelming grief. The ocean was silent. The Titanic was gone. Back in New York, thousands gathered at the harbor, waiting for loved ones who would never return. Some held flowers. Others carried hope. Many left with broken hearts. The tragedy shocked the entire world. People began asking difficult questions. Why weren't there enough lifeboats? Why did the ship continue at high speed despite iceberg warnings? How could the unsinkable ship disappear on its very first voyage? Those questions changed maritime history forever. New international safety laws required enough lifeboats for everyone on board, continuous radio communication, and the creation of the International Ice Patrol to monitor dangerous icebergs. For decades, the Titanic rested nearly 12,500 feet beneath the Atlantic Ocean, hidden from the world. Then, in 1985, explorer Robert Ballard discovered its wreck. Even after more than 70 years underwater, the ship remained a haunting reminder of that unforgettable night. In 1997, James Cameron's blockbuster film Titanic introduced millions to the disaster, blending fiction with a real historical tragedy. But behind the Hollywood romance were thousands of real people whose dreams ended in the icy Atlantic. The Titanic wasn't just a ship. It became a lesson about pride, human vulnerability, sacrifice, and hope. More than a century later, people still remember the courage of ordinary men and women who faced extraordinary circumstances. The Titanic reminds us that wealth couldn't buy survival, power couldn't stop nature, and courage often shines brightest in humanity's darkest moments. Its story isn't simply about a ship that sank. It's about dreams that crossed an ocean, heroes who chose others over themselves, and a tragedy that changed the world forever. That is why, more than 100 years later, the name Titanic still echoes through history, not only as one of the greatest disasters ever recorded, but as one of the most unforgettable stories of courage, love, and the resilience of the human spirit.